Welcome to Changing the Channel with Joe Garner, a show about shifting our individual and collective beliefs on what is possible for the future of humanity. As our understanding of how our reality continues to shift, we are at a point of reunification between science and spirituality. What does the world look like when we break free from the generational trauma that has kept most humans playing small for thousands of years and step into our full power as the co-creators of this reality? I always ask that you keep an open mind with this podcast. Ask yourself what resonates with my truth at this time and what does not. Respect your intuition, but see if you can get through the whole show because there might be that little nugget buried deep in the conversation that unlocks something for you. Thank you again for joining me on another episode of Changing the Channel. Today I have Dara Israel. She is somebody I met down in Costa Rica, down in a tiny little town called Potrero. She was teaching yoga at the local yoga studio, and when I was doing my research, I saw that she had a Kundalini and I think a Breathwork class that were on the menu, and I was very excited to get down there and try them. I'd never done Kundalini before that trip in January. And since then, I've really kind of delved into a little bit more about what that is. And it's been, I wouldn't say a huge part of my practice, but it's definitely shaped how I understand the world. So welcome to the show, Dara.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so you've been on this journey of basically taking all your passions from breathwork to scuba diving, free diving, yoga, mindfulness, Kundalini, and really putting it all into this unique package. How did you go from where you started, which was, growing up in the Northeast US, to finding all these passions? What was that path like for you?
Yeah, it was, feels like it was a long one. So I grew up in the suburbs in New Jersey and kind of exactly what you expect. Not quite like a white picket fence town, but hang out at the gas station at 2 a.m. on the weekends because there's nowhere else to go kind of town, And I had a tremendous amount of anxiety growing up from the time that I was quite young, just because of the dynamics of my household. I started dealing with pretty severe chronic depression from a pretty young age as well. And it was a rough beginning in a bunch of different ways. And so by the time I got to college, I had no self-esteem, no self-confidence. Depression was a very common part of my life, as was anxiety, social anxiety, all of it. I was very much living in and ruled by my fears. The one thing I had, though, was that I was certain I knew what I wanted to do with my life, and that was that I wanted to be a filmmaker. And I had wanted to be a filmmaker since I was maybe 5 or 6. So this had been a lifelong dream. It was easy. I was applying to college. I was like, yeah, I'm only applying to film schools. That's it. That's what it's always been. And so I go to college, finish my degree, move to New York City, start working in the film industry. Immediately, I'm like, oh, I made a mistake. This is not for me. This is not who I am. This is not what I want my life to be. This sucks. I feel like I'm working so hard and being treated terribly and paid terribly. And for what? Just to create a lot of waste. And what are we doing for the world? And so this kind of sent me down a spiral, both literally in the sense that now I had no idea what I was going to do. I'm in my early 20s out in the world and I have, a film degree. And for sure, no, the only thing I definitely don't want to do is work in film. And of course, this was not great for my depression and my anxiety and having all the voices of capitalism. You're not good enough. You have to do something. You're running out of time. You have to be somebody before you turn 30, that big magic scary number, whatever. And I was extremely lost. And so at this point, I started working as a video editor for an advertising agency to survive. And while I was doing that, there was a girl that I sort of knew from college, and she started traveling all the time. And I was really, really jealous of this girl. I didn't know her personally, but part of me hated her because she just seemed so cool and so happy and so sure of what she was doing. And she was traveling the world, whatever. And one day I sort of was okay, well, if I'm jealous of her because she's traveling all over and I don't know what I want to do anyway. Like maybe I should go travel. Maybe that's a sign. And so this kind of got me into following my jealousy. It was what I was kind of calling it, and sort of using jealousy as a way of figuring out what I wanted. It was a way of kind of pointing me in the direction of like, you're jealous of that person because they have something that you think you don't have or can't have or whatever. So let's go after that. So I started traveling. And of course, at this time too, because I was working an office job, I spent a lot of time avoiding doing my actual job and instead was reading the news, which brought me down a whole bunch of depressing rabbit holes, particularly climate rabbit holes. And every day I would just get so depressed by the state of the world and feeling like the entire planet was just kind of completely falling apart before my eyes, and it broke my heart. And I wanted to know, I was like, is it really this serious? Like, are we really this screwed? Is there actually nothing we can do? Because that's kind of the way the media portrays it, is it's doom and gloom. There's nothing that can be done. Like panic, panic, panic. That's it. So in my travels, I got into diving. As a kid, I was always into The Little Mermaid, so it was a natural thing to want to try. And as soon as I tried it, it was the most calm I had ever felt. My anxiety went away, my depression went away. Like I felt connected to myself underwater in a way that I had never experienced. I felt truly present for the first time in my life. And so I kept going out of my way to find more diving opportunities and be underwater as much as possible. And while I was doing that, I was also seeking out people who were working in conservation so that I could ask people who knew firsthand what's really going on, how screwed are we actually? And I got a lot of mixed answers on that. But then, as I went on this journey, I was like, okay, like the only skills I have are filmmaking and I don't really want to do this, but that's what I have. So I guess if I could use it for conservation, then I would maybe be happier. And so I started to try and figure out how I could do that. I invested in some dive master training, which is the first professional level. And then I put most of my savings into buying underwater camera equipment. And then like 2 weeks later, the pandemic hit. So now I'm in Brooklyn with a closet full of camera equipment and boxes and no job. And what am I supposed to do? And I was so upset because it was ruining all my plans. I was finally I finally had found the thing that I could do to make something of myself and be somebody that matters and whatever. And now the stupid pandemic is ruining everything for me, was how I felt. And so I was like, okay, well, how can I be as productive as possible during this downtime? And I was thinking, I've been told for a long time that I should try meditation because I had always had very high stress levels. And so I was like, okay, I guess I'll try it now. And so I tried here and there, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever, and it wasn't working, I didn't think. Until one day it suddenly really did. And I had this huge experience that totally shook me out of my atheism and completely changed my life. In that one, it was, I think, like a 20-minute guided meditation or something. But in that 20 minutes, my entire life changed. And I just experienced a level of truth. And I saw things that shifted my perspective in such a way that I knew the rest of my life was going to be dedicated to understanding what that was. Next thing you know, I'm at a Zen meditation center in New Mexico. I'm doing a 4-month monastic training program there. And I knew I wanted to move to the beach. I knew I still wanted to work in diving. I knew I wanted to work in conservation, but I didn't know how. And then suddenly I happened to make the right connection. I have somebody who owned a dive shop and marine conservation nonprofit down in Costa Rica who needed a filmmaker and photographer to come down for 6 months. And that was 2.5 years ago. And that was pretty much that. So while I was down there, I was like, okay, I finally figured it out. Here we are. I've arrived. And then, of course, that's not how things work usually. And long story short, all of that kind of crumbled away. And then I found freediving, which for those who don't know anything about diving, scuba diving is the one where you've got a tank of air on your back. In freediving, you have no air. It's just, you take one breath, filling your lungs, and then dive down using that. And the beautiful thing about freediving is it's such a natural process. Our bodies were designed for this. And so it's a lot more of a mental game than it is a physical game. And once I found this, I realized it was kind of the thing I had been looking for all this time. And it sort of connected everything for me, my love of the ocean, and being underwater with my interests in meditation and connecting to the body and everything. And that just sort of developed from there. And I believe you asked how all these things then came together into what I'm doing now.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, it just kind of happened on its own. I think there's a lot of people, myself included, have this obsession with trying to make things fit. Like, how can I consciously, like intentionally create this thing that I'm going to plan? I've learned it just doesn't work that way. I spent a bunch of years kind of picking up different modalities, trying different things, starting different businesses, and then being like, nope, that's not it. That's not it. That's not it. And then at a certain point, it all just kind of clicked. And I realized, oh, this thing fits with this thing, fits with this thing, fits with this thing, in this way, in this way, in this way. And kind of suddenly I got to a point where I was like, I can see the linear progression of what I have done and all that I've learned and picked up, but I never could have planned it this way. And that was sort of a very defining moment for me of realizing, okay, like fully, I had heard this before. I was pretending to believe it, but then when I experienced this, I was like, oh yes, the universe really does have a plan. And it's all kind of planned out. It's all happening in its own time. And that's pretty much how we got here, is I just kind of kept trying things and then suddenly they all clicked.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see it. That's happened. That's been my experience as well. You cannot see the path until you look back into the past, basically. So, the dots that are all connecting to get you to exactly where you are right now can only be seen as a linear path when you look backwards at them. And when you're experiencing them, when you're walking those from one dot to the next dot to the next dot, it feels like you're failing over and over and over again until one day it's just like, oh, wait, all of these have gotten me to this point, and now I have this opportunity. And not only is there this opportunity, but there's energy that's flowing into this. Like, there are people that want to be a part of this, that want to do this, that want to be involved in what you're creating. And now it's like, oh, that's why I did all this stuff. It had nothing to do with, that linear progression of, I got to do this to get this, to get this. It was just like, I've allowed these things to happen. They've happened for a reason. And now, when I let go of the wheel, when I allow the, basically the energy to flow, everything just kind of aligns for you, and not the way that you think that it's going to align, but in a way that is usually even better than what you could have ever imagined. I want to take a minute from the show to share how you can support Changing the Channel. This show is my passion project, and if you feel called to support, the best place to start is by subscribing and sharing the podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. Next would be to check out my website in the show notes, where you can become a VIP of the show and get exclusive content not available anywhere else. Finally, you can engage with the Q&A and polls to have direct say in the direction of the show. I am forever thankful for your support. And now, back to the show.
Absolutely. There's no way I could have planned it this way. And this has been, and of course, hindsight is such a beautiful gift, but I, in hindsight, too, can see and understand now that so much of the way that this worked out for me was, what was once follow your jealousy has now turned into follow your joy. But this sort of idea of like, through my 20s, I got to this point that I'm at now, where suddenly everything has kind of clicked and makes sense, because I kept trying new things. And I definitely had a lot of self-limiting beliefs that had to be removed along the way in order for me to get to the place that I'm in today. But now that I can see that path and that journey in hindsight, it's so beautiful the way that all of that is timed. And how every time I let go of a limiting belief about myself, it opened a new door. And it's like, okay, you don't believe that you can travel by yourself because, you're too anxious or too introverted or too whatever. And then as soon as you let go of that, you do this thing, and it expands from there. Yeah.
So yeah, you followed your joy constantly and continued to build these skills. What was it like? What was that process like, putting them all together, and maybe go into a little bit about what you're currently offering?
Yeah. So I knew, let's see. I think I will always have a deep love for scuba diving because it was such an integral part of my healing journey and healing my own depression and anxiety. Um, which I just want to take a quick moment to note moving forward. Whenever I say heal my depression and anxiety, I don't mean to suggest that I never feel depressed or anxious anymore, but I mean it in the sense that it's not something that controls my life. It's a very, very small piece of my existence now, whereas it used to be my entire existence. So that's what I mean by that, just for clarity. Um, so I always love scuba diving for this reason, but in a lot of ways, I think it's quite inaccessible for a lot of people, financially as well as physically, because there's a lot more counterindications involved in it than scuba diving, or sorry, free diving. Um, because free diving, as I said before, is something that our bodies naturally are designed to do. So unless, for most people, it's a very accessible thing, and it's you just grab a mask and fins and you go out to the water, right? There, you don't need to have all this equipment, and you should have some training, but it's not as much training as a scuba and everything. And so I knew once I found free diving, I was like, okay, this is one of the coolest things I've ever encountered, because in order to be good at free diving, you have to be very connected to your body and your breath. And so much of the process of learning to free dive is about learning how to be present, learning how to listen to the signals in your body, learning how to breathe properly, because most of us don't. Most of us restrict the breath in different ways throughout our lives due to trauma and fear and all these other things. But that's a whole other question. And so through freediving, we really, really deeply connect with the breath in this way. We learn how to breathe properly, how to use that breath, how to listen to our body signals. And then we get to do all this in the ocean. And when we are freediving, we are truly creatures of the ocean. I always feel like scuba divers are tourists of the ocean and freedivers are inhabitants of the ocean. I mean, there are so many marine creatures that breathe oxygen, turtles and dolphins and whales. And so they can be marine animals. I feel like we can be too. But yeah, so it kind of creates both this deep connection with yourself as well as with the environment. There's really nothing more magical than being down 10 meters, hanging on to the bottom of a line and just floating there on your own, and just like hearing the sounds of the water in your ears, hearing the distant singing of the whales if you're lucky, and just getting to be fully present in that moment. And so in this way, freediving can be so healing in so many ways. It's also really great for building confidence, because people all the time, every time I talk about freediving with somebody who's never done it, the first thing I hear is, oh, well, I can't do that because I can't do that because I can't hold my breath for a long time. I can't do that because I'm afraid of sharks. I can't do that because. And almost always it's, unless you have, some severe heart or lung or ear problems that physically prevent you from doing this safely, like, other than that, everybody can do this. It's like when people say they can't go to yoga because they're not flexible. It's like, well, you go to yoga and that helps you get flexible, right?
Right.
And it's the same with freediving. I was like, okay, you can't hold your breath for a long time because how much training have you done? Probably very little. But if you train in freediving, you'll get better at these things. If you go to the ocean and learn about sharks, you'll be less afraid of them, etc. And so what happens is, because our bodies are designed to do this, and we have a bunch of evolutionary adaptations that allow us to hold our breath longer in water than we can on land, what ends up happening is people say, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this. And then they come and they try. And on the very first day, every single time, they end up doing more than they thought they would. They thought that maybe they would hold their breath for 15 seconds and they hold their breath for 90 seconds. And it happens every time with every student I had who says they can't do it. They come and they do it and they do better than they thought. And so what happens in this experience is, when they realize, oh, like, I thought I couldn't do this, but I actually did it and I did it pretty well. Then the next step of that is, if I could do that thing that I thought I couldn't do, what other things that I've been telling myself I can't do that I can actually do. And so this is a really awesome opportunity to rewrite these limiting beliefs and change the narrative of I can't do it to I can do whatever I decide I want to do if I'm willing to put the work in. So that was kind of the first step for me. And then I've been practicing yoga for about 12 years now, I guess. So that was sort of always a natural thing to add in for me because it also has a deep connection to the body and the breath and the mind. And so also because with freediving, a lot of it is about remaining as calm and centered and present as possible, kind of combining these two modalities just made sense. And then I started coming across a lot of somatic breathwork practices. And this was a new thing for me at that point, and it is an immensely powerful healing practice. The ability that somatic breath has to just shake all your shit up and help you release, like find and release old memories, emotions, traumas, etc., it's really powerful. And so I had a couple of experiences with breathwork that really, really changed things for me and kind of had been some of the most transformational experiences of my journey so far. And then as soon as I had the opportunity to go and become a breathwork practitioner myself, I had to do it just because it had been calling to me for so long. So I did that training, and it was just the healing that I experienced, the healing that I got to watch others experience during that time was just completely profound. And it quickly fell into place with freediving for me because, again, it's another breath-based practice, but in a very different sense. So with freediving, we're really trying to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. We really want to, as I said, be as calm and relaxed and as possible and feel safe and all this because it allows us to hold our breath for longer and have better, more enjoyable and safer dives. But with somatic breath work, we are kind of doing the opposite thing. We are consciously, intentionally, and lovingly turning on the sympathetic nervous system. And by doing this with intention, we are bypassing our conscious thinking mind into our subconscious. We're able to kind of find the layers of things that are controlling us like puppets in our day-to-day lives. And when we find those things and feel and release them, then we can move in this life with a whole new level of freedom. So these two things work really well, in my opinion, because the somatic breath work is sort of the opportunity to do like the work, quote unquote, right? Like this is not always, sometimes it can be relaxing and joyous and fun. And sometimes you see God and whatever, and that's cool. But I think most of the time it's at least the way that I have experienced it, it's an opportunity to kind of work on the shadow and work through some stuff there. Mm-hmm. And so that's the one side. And then with freediving, you're still doing this work because we're building ourselves up and building our confidence and everything through that. But it's also very playful. It's an opportunity to have fun. It's an opportunity to go explore. Like on my next freediving retreat in Mexico, we're going to go freedive and snorkel with whale sharks. Like that's super fun. That's super playful. And I think it's really important to have this balance because I think there is kind of an obsession in some spiritual circles with shadow work, shadow work, shadow work. You have to be working all the time. And this is the exact same mentality as capitalism or toxic capitalism in the sense that, you're not good enough, you're not good enough, you're not good enough, keep working. And so I think for this reason, it's really important to balance the shadow work with playful work, I guess. And in this way, combining breathwork and freediving has been a really powerful practice, both for me and for my clients. And then, doing yoga in addition to that, and cacao ceremonies I'd love to lead as well. And then, like just telling ocean stories and continuing to use my film and photography and writing skills to show the ocean to people and tell her stories, and not just the ocean, but the land too, and just tell the stories of the land to people who are not necessarily able to come out and experience it for themselves yet. And so through all these modalities, they kind of each found me in their own time, in their own way, and just kind of fit together in ways that I never could have expected or never could have planned for when I was 21 and trying to figure out what my life was going to be.
Right. And what were some of the difficult parts? Because again, from a linear perspective, it looks like this came to this, and then this fell into this, and then this went into that. But tell us a little bit about the struggles that you went through as you were coming onto these modalities, and then not necessarily figuring out, but seeing where they all fit together.
Mm-hmm. I think the biggest struggle for me has been imposter syndrome and not feeling good enough. I definitely have been walking around with this self-limiting belief about not being good enough for my entire life. And I still, see this coming up in different degrees. And so that has been by far the biggest struggle so far. Is there have been a bunch of instances where I've been like, oh, this would be really cool, but I can't do this. And having to kind of then go in and do that inner work to even, first of all, recognize that I was putting that kind of barrier on myself and putting that limitation on myself. But then once I recognize it, trying to understand where it came from and feel through that and let it go. And it's, with things like that, like this belief came from, at least from, the original birth trauma, if not from past lives. So it's very deeply ingrained in there. And all of us have these limiting beliefs in different ways that we're carrying around. And it's not like you can just kind of snap your fingers or have one really good mushroom trip or whatever. It suddenly goes away. It's a process. So going
Yeah.
on that journey and like continuously reminding myself that I can do this and I can have the life that I want and I am capable of doing whatever I want to do. And like all the things I'm always telling other people, like that being true for me as well. That is a continuous job for me. Is like continuing to remember that.
Yeah,
That's
that's
been the hardest part.
I think you've made that very clear, that the journey is never over, that even though you are doing the healing work and you have healed yourself, I mean, there's still, it comes up all the time for me as well. I've been doing the healing work for a number of years now, but there's still days where I feel like I'm not enough, or that depression comes over me, or that concern about, well, how am I going to make fruit from this, this thing that I'm working on? How am I going to make money? How am I going to provide for myself? And every time I get into that, now I'm more and more conscious of it. And because I've done the work, it doesn't overtake my conscious programming. It's just, I can see it, I can experience it, and then I can move past it. And typically it's showing me a part that hasn't healed all the way, that there's still this belief inside of me, or this pattern that's existing inside of me, or some other aspect of me that doesn't think that I am good enough, am capable of becoming who I need to become. And I think that's what the shadow does. It shows you, hey, here's where you can shine some light in on this. And as you shine the light in on it, you're not getting rid of that darkness. You're bringing it into the light, and you're making it a part of you that eventually becomes your strongest aspect of yourself. I mean, that's kind of the game that we're all playing, is that the darkest parts of you become the most powerful parts of you when you shine the light inside of them.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. And I couldn't agree more. It's so true. And because of this, I'm so grateful for all of the struggles with anxiety and depression and low self-confidence I've had, because I'm very good at working with other people who are also experiencing this now, because I understand it in such a deep way. I work with everybody, but specifically with freediving, I tend to attract a lot of clients and students who are terrified, with a lot of anxiety, are terrified of the ocean or something in that realm. And it's kind of my favorite thing, because sometimes people will freak out, right? And this is sort of part of it. It's like if they show up, then okay, like I know they're ready to do this because they showed up, even if they don't fully realize yet they're ready for it. But I know these people are coming to me because even if we haven't talked about it, some part of them can feel that I understand, that I completely understand what it feels like to be overrun by anxiety and fear. And I'm so grateful that I get to help people on this journey, because it's a really empowering one. I mean, anxiety and depression and fear and all that, it's heavy. It's a really heavy thing to walk around with. But once you sort of see the other side of it, it becomes this really beautiful, empowering game. Okay, like the flip side of that coin, the light to that darkness is quite bright, quite beautiful. And I'm so grateful to get to help people with that. And this is something I've actually been trying to remind myself of a lot recently, because in my personal life, I've been doing a lot of work with the, you know, healing the divine feminine energies within myself, because I have lived in kind of a hyper masculine space for a lot of my life as a way of protecting myself. Mm-hmm. And so through this divine healing or divine feminine healing I've been doing, it's forcing me to face up to a lot of sexual trauma I've experienced in the past. And there are definitely days where I'm like, this is horrible. And I hate that I had to go through this. And I hate that I have to figure this out now. But then I remember, like, like, this sucks. And it sucked when it happened. And it sucks trying to, like, unpiece it now. But when I feel like I've done enough work on it within myself, I'm going to be really, really good at helping other people who have gone through similar things. And that is going to be such an amazingly beautiful and powerful experience. And I'm really excited for that. And like knowing that that is the journey that I'm on, and as kind of the result and the purpose of the pain that I went through, that is what kind of motivates me to keep being really dedicated to my own healing in that way.
Yeah, that's an amazing reframe to go from, it's so easy to get down and, why do I have to experience this pain and suffering? And why do I have to go through this trauma again, even though I lived it? And well, you haven't dealt with it. You got to get it out of your system if you're going to try to become something greater than yourself, right? You got to get it out. And the only way to get it out is to bring it to the surface. And as you bring it to the surface, having a purpose for that healing makes it so much more bearable than just, I have to get it out because I want to be healed. Having that purpose in life. And I talk about this in business, in life, in general, the idea of having a purpose behind what you are doing makes everything so much more bearable, so much more, all the suffering, the setbacks, the frustrations, the anxiety, when you have that purpose. And you've found such a beautiful purpose. It's, again, your purpose is to help others go through this through you dealing with it. I think that's an important perspective to have for anybody who's going through that healing journey, and to not get stuck in the healing journey, because I see that a lot. People they get into the spiritual healing circles, and instead of realizing how far they've come, how much healing they've done, they get stuck on the fact that there's still more to be healed, right? And they just, for years and years and years of their life, they're trying to heal until they're perfect. And I found out that yes, there is a time and a place to do some of that healing. You have to start from, square one, start doing some of the healing on yourself. But at some point, it's time to go back out into the real world. And the healing, it's not that the healing stops. You continue to heal, but by going back out into the real world, you are now exposed to new stimuli that are going to bring up different parts of you that may be able to be healed, instead of focusing on that one or two or three different aspects that need to be healed. And by bringing it back out into the world and making it, some type of concrete idea, that the healing just happens naturally at that point. And instead of it being a consciously driven healing prospect or endeavor, right? It now becomes this like kind of subconscious being drawn out of you, the healing aspects that need to come. And that is when, the true healing is happening, when you're doing it at a subconscious level, instead of, consciously saying, this is broken with me, how do I fix it? This is broken with me, how do I fix it? And yeah, the conscious mind has to kind of realize that there is something that needs to be healed. But when you can do the healing at the subconscious level, I mean, doors just start to open up. It becomes incredible what happens in your life.
Absolutely. And I think, yeah, all of that is so important. I agree. I think in the spiritual community, there is this tendency to get lost in the healing in a way. And as I said before, I mean, there is kind of a danger of getting too obsessed with this need to heal, like always more work to do, chasing enlightenment, whatever. Because when you're doing that, you're doing it from the ego. It's another way in which you're telling yourself you're not good enough as you are. And I think that it's like I love being in conscious community and those kinds of like eco village retreat centers, things like this, but for a period of time, right? You go there as a retreat, as an opportunity to really focus for a period of time on your healing, on your journey, whatever that looks like in that moment. But when people stay there and just live there permanently and they don't engage with the outside world, it's like, okay, you're doing all this healing and that's great. Great that you're dedicating yourself to your healing and your growth, but what does that really mean if you don't then take that healing and everything you've learned and bring that back out to the world? If you're not sharing it, what's the point? And I know like so many people seem unhappy to have incarnated on Earth as humans, but we came here for a reason. You know, we're here to play the game, so go play the game. And part of playing the game is not hiding in these, you know, safe, conscious communities, and it's, you know, doing the work and taking refuge when you need it and going deep inside yourself and healing whatever you can as you can. But then it's also like going out and playing the damn game and doing something with the things that you've learned and that elevates.
Right. Go out and play the game with the set of rules that you now much better understand, because that's what we're kind of learning. We're learning the rules of the game when we're doing this spiritual work. And that when you're connecting with the aspects of yourself that exist outside of reality, it's like getting the cheat codes to life. It's like getting the cheat codes to the game, because now you understand, okay, well, I am the one that is actually creating the reality that I'm experiencing, right? So, you know, that's an important part of your spiritual development, is going from the victimhood mentality to the manifestor mentality, to understanding that you are literally creating the external reality through the thoughts, beliefs, and patterns that you have on your internal reality. And that, you know, that as you continue down that route, that really the only work to be doing is on yourself. And you know, again, like you can't just sit in a room and do work on yourself and then not have any input as to, okay, what did that work do? You got to have these, you got to go out into the world and have these mirrors that are reflecting back to you who you are truly being. Otherwise, you can sit in your room all day and say, "Oh, well, I've manifested everything into my life. I'm a healed being. I'm everything that I need to be." But if you can't take that out into the real world, out into the third dimension, and interact with other people, then that, it has no bearing. It has no standing. Like if you can't take what you've learned and create something in the real world based on that information, then unfortunately it's just mental masturbation at that point. It's just, you know, kind of, you're in your own head doing work and not actually living life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if we are, you know, spiritual beings, we are healers who have incarnated at this place in this time in order to raise the consciousness and raise the vibration of the earth and the collective, are we doing that by hiding amongst each other? Like, no, we're not. If we're, you know, saying all these things to people that already are on that vibe, it's not really making as much of an impact. And also, I think, was it Ram Dass who said, if you think that you're awakened, go home to your parents' house or something like that?
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, and I also think that there is a, you know, everybody's journey is different, and I still respect everyone and wherever they are on their journey and whatever they believe they need to do. Again, you know, looking back at my journey, I would have never thought I would have gone to the places that I've gone and done the things that I've done. I mean, you know, in the name of healing myself, or in the name of becoming a clearer vessel, or, you know, whatever story that I've kind of told myself along the way of why I'm doing the things that I've been doing. So it, you know, I try not to pass judgment, but I do try to share that as there was definitely a part of my life, probably a 4 or 5 month period, where I was stuck in that healing journey. It was like, well, I'm always going to be broken. Like, how am I going to heal all this stuff? And when I actually stepped out and started doing things back in the real world and realizing, oh, wow, look at how far I have come, that difference has been gigantic for me. And I've also had people along the way to guide me and share and be a bigger part and tell me, hey, you're doing great. Like you're, you know, it might not look like it from your internal perspective, but from the outside, I see this massive difference in who you are and who you're being. And again, they're just like little breadcrumbs that keep leading you down that right path. And when you're experiencing those, again, when you're out in the real world and you're sharing who you truly are, those things come naturally back to you. People are going to notice that, oh, wow, like look at the difference. Like I'm sure if people from your high school like met you now, they would be like, I don't even recognize the person that I'm seeing in this in this, I know that that's you in there, like this is your physical body, but the person that exists that's operating this body is completely different than that person that you were. And that's the whole part of it. It's why we're here. It's to continue the evolution. And again, you have to have a connection to something that is greater than you to be evolving. That's the whole idea behind evolution, is that it's guided by something that we don't, from our perspective, necessarily understand. And that's been a huge shift in the sciences, going from this Darwinian idea of what evolution is, these random mutations that had beneficial effects in the real world. That idea is basically going out the window, and science is actually starting to prove that there is a fundamental animating energy that exists that is guiding evolution along. And not just evolution in the physical aspect, but evolution in, the interpersonal aspect. And then that leads to something that you've kind of been talking about as well, which is as we as individuals continue to heal ourselves, that creates this healing effect on the collective, and the collective being the entire planet, right? So you talk about, the personal healing process that directly ties into the planetary healing process. So I'd love to kind of hear a little bit of your perspective on that.
Yeah. So first, I just want to say, because if you have not already read the book Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, I cannot recommend it more highly. I always feel like this is required reading for humanity. I just finished reading it for like the fourth time or something. And this was reading this book was sort of the beginning of this, understanding this idea for me, which is why I bring it up now. So I highly recommend that for everybody listening, if this is a topic that you're interested in, go check out that book. But yeah, I mean, so as we have discussed, and we know, we create our external world through our internal world, right? And it makes a lot of sense that our planet is falling apart, is sick, is dying, when internally, as a species, as a collective, we have chronic depression and anxiety and stress and low self-confidence and disconnection from ourselves and from the planet. We are so out of tune with the earth at this point. Like, how many people know what foods are seasonal and local to where they live? Not many. How many people are, if you do know, okay, great. How many people are actually eating foods that are seasonal and genuinely local to where you live? And I'm not saying that I am perfect by any means, right? I'm not, I'm not putting that out there, right? We're all still human. But, these things, and you look at how many people are completely terrified of bugs, right? But they're just other beings in our world, and I'm not, of course, talking about poisonous ones that I actually heard of, but in this obsession we have with being clean, right? And we don't have any idea how to exist in this world. You look out your window and check how many names of plants you can name that are, right in your yard or on your street. How many of the trees do you know? How many of the bushes? How many of the flowers and the weeds and the insects? How many of them do you know by name? Do you know anything about how they work? Do you know how they live in relation to the other beings that are out in that environment? For most of us, the answer is none and no. And that's extremely sad. Because when you see every living animal and insect and plant being as truly another conscious being, it completely shifts your vision of the world. It completely shifts your perspective of this place in such a beautiful way. I mean, partially, of course, in a heartbreaking way, because the implications of that, given our current climate situation, are pretty heavy. But at the same time, it's extremely beautiful to realize And when we are sick, that is mirrored in the external world, in the planet, because of the way we're treating our planet, right? We have, if you look back to, the beginning of human times, we had more than enough. We were sustained by the land. I know people love to make this argument of like, oh, well, back in cave times, people died young, and, if you got injured, that was it. Whenever I'm like, yeah, I just don't listen to that argument at all. Mm-hmm. Because, it's not like we've cheated death. Also, are we better off living into our 70s, 80s, 90s if we are very sick and can't move or remember or think?
Right. What's the quality of life that you have at that point?
Exactly. And it's, if you're, on antidepressants for your entire life, that's great that you lived to 85, but did you enjoy it fully?
Did you learn your lessons? Did you experience what you were meant to experience by coming to this physical reality? Like,
right. Exactly. But I digress. So that, I'm just not going to listen to that argument anymore.
Yeah, and I think it's also kind of important to understand the intelligence of nature, because conscious humans have been around. Some people argue 200,000 years, some people argue 2 million years. Whatever the number is, it's nowhere close to 3.5 billion years old, and nature has been doing this way longer than we are. So when we get out of touch of how nature is actually building different systems, when we lose track of the intelligence of nature and we just decide, oh, well, we're going to do it our way because we're the apex, we're the top, we're the most intelligent being in the world that we know. And it's like, well, we are the most intelligent piece of a being that we know of, but we've kind of forgotten that we're actually a part of nature, that we're actually a part of this system and not the whole of it or separate from it. So as that happens, yeah, it's a natural progression for us to start basically harming and destroying everything because we think that we know what's best, instead of looking at, again, how you structure a business. It should be structured more like how nature structures things, these decentralized systems with different parts that interact with each other, but there's no necessarily like guiding force. There's no CEO of nature that's saying, hey, we better do something over here in the Middle East, or we're gonna run out of water next year. It's like, okay, all these systems build on top of each other, and they have this innate intelligence inside of them. And if we can design a society around, how nature has structured things, then we really release the full potential of what humanity can be. But if we continue to believe the hubris of our own existence is that we are more intelligent than nature, then that's where things start to fall apart. And that's where, again, we go down this destructive road of humanity.
Absolutely. And I mean, first of all, we are the most intelligent species based on our own metrics of what intelligence is.
Yeah.
Which is ridiculous. I mean, look at plants, for example. They take sunlight and turn it into food, both for themselves and for others. That's cool. Do we know how to do that? Absolutely not. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to take sunlight and make it food.
There's actually there's some interesting quantum biology that is kind of saying that humans can actually take sunlight and turn it into energy, and that's what we're actually doing at the cellular level. Is instead of using the photosynthesis that plants do, we're actually using the melanin in our skin to turn sunlight into energy, which is a kind of an interesting thing. And it's also something that comes up in spiritual communities sometimes, where they talk about, well, in the future, we're not going to need to have sustenance from food. We're going to get all our energy from the sun, which there's actually some scientific evidence that is a possibility for humanity, that it's not just some spiritual mumbo jumbo, that there's literally a way for us to do that. But we are not at that point right now. The belief isn't there. The genes are not turned on for us to be able to do that. But I will say that is a possibility, that there is some science behind that in the quantum biology field.
That's very cool. Okay. So I'm super cool with the idea of like eventually turning into a plant. I think that's big.
Yeah.
And I think also it's important to note in indigenous cultures in North America, many of them, if not all of them, believe that, humans we're the newest species, right? Which means we have a lot to learn from everybody else out there. It's sort of the opposite mentality of what our society today is kind of operating with as a baseline. It's like, we love to think that we are in charge of everything, we know everything, and the earth is something for us to use. But actually, we're the new guys here. We're here to learn from all of the other beings who've been here far longer than us and have a lot of lessons about how to live a good life in reciprocity that we really need to learn if we're going to turn this around. And I think that's a big part of this is around the energies of scarcity and abundance. And, like kind of what I was going to say before I went off on the caveman tangent was, back in the beginning of times before agriculture and industry took off, we always had enough, and of course, like, not to say it was always comfortable where there was a solution easily available for every problem or whatever. But, we had enough. The land supported us, provided for us, and we were able to live. And then somewhere along the way, we got this idea. We were like, you know what? Actually, what if we pretended we didn't have enough? What if we took all of these resources that are plentiful and abundant and actually made them hard to get? Wouldn't that be fun? And then for some reason, we decided to flip this game on its head. And now we're all living from this place of scarcity, of this idea, like, there's not enough, like, money is hard to make and it's hard to keep, and all this is hard, and I need all of this. We've forgotten so much. But when we live in this place of scarcity, it makes it really, really difficult to believe in abundance. But when you can shift that energy towards abundance, towards trusting that, I always have had and always will have what I need, there is enough for me, that can really change both your internal landscape, but also our relationship with the earth. Because so many of the problems that we're facing today with climate change stem from us taking and taking and taking and taking too much. It's taking that which is not freely given to us, because the earth truly does freely give us so much. But we decided at some point that wasn't enough, and then we decided to go and just take and take and take and take everything we could. But when we look at life as a gift, when we look at food as a gift, as sunlight as a gift, as every part of our being, when we look at it as a gift, it's a lot harder to take it for granted. It's a lot harder to demand more, right? Like, if somebody gives you a gift, you're not going to be like, cool, thanks, give me another one, It's a very different energy than if you're like going to a store yourself and you're like, hey, I'm gonna buy this, and like, I'm here, so I guess I'll also buy that, and you get home and you're like, I didn't really need all this shit, why did I get all this shit? But if something's being given to you, you're grateful for the thing that you got, regardless of how, like, what or how much it is, because it's the act of giving, it's the act of receiving. And so when we let ourselves be in reciprocity with the earth in this way, both in the sense of being willing to receive and then giving back to the earth with gratitude, with a deep, heartfelt gratitude for the receiving, for all that's being given to us, it can heal both our relationship with the planet, the external world, but also our relationships with ourselves, because these kind of battling energies of scarcity and abundance are at play in every aspect of our lives.
Right. So last question, this is a thought experiment for you, and I'm interested to hear your perspective. Can we use technology aligned with the natural forces of the universe to create solutions to these problems that we have? Or do we have to go back to being in, a total natural state with nature? Like, can we still maintain a lot of the technology that we have and the abundance and the ability to, thrive in the world without having to, be sustenance farmers, or go along those lines, or does it require us to go back to ancient times, to before these technologies existed?
I think the answer is a little bit of both. I think we do need to go back to ancient times in the sense that we need to return to indigenous knowledge. We need to return to the things that we used to know. We need to return to these old energies of abundance, of reciprocity, of giving back to the earth. We need to return to that mindset, is really what it is. We need to return to the ancient mindset. I don't think that it is reasonable to say that we need to give up all of our technologies and return to an ancient life in the physical sense as well. I think that's sort of one of those things where, like, if we decide that's what needs to happen, then we are giving up on the possibility of saving the planet. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because it's just not going to happen. And I do think that there is a way that technology can be used for good. And especially at this point in time, like, we have trashed this earth. And because we are the ones that have trashed it, it is our responsibility to clean it up. And technology is going to be an important part of that. It's going to play an important role in our duty to clean up this earth. So I do think that technology is important in this way. And since we have gotten to this point, since we have created this and evolved to the point of being able to have this technology and create this technology, like, it's here to stay. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I'm not a Luddite for the most part, but I do think our relationship to technology is going to have to change because we are so dependent on it. And we really, I'm not gonna talk about all the ways that, our constant access to technology is cutting us off from each other and everything. But, we've all heard that conversation a million times, but also the way that our technology has cut us off from the natural world, like how many times, like spending time inside on your computer instead of going outside for a walk, or like when you're outside for a walk, looking at stuff on your phone and not noticing the other beings that are, living around you in the woods, growing through the cracks in the sidewalks, flying through the trees, whatever. It just cuts us off. And so we have to find a healthier relationship with it. But I think that technology can kind of help us do that. Going back to what I was saying before about how most of us don't know anything about the names or lives of the other beings on this planet that we share this planet with, there are some great apps for this. You can like take a photo of a tree and it'll tell you what kind of tree it is. And this is, I think, a really cool way to use technology. So I think there is a wonderful way that technology can help us repair this relationship and help us repair the damage that has been done. But I think really it's our mindset that needs to change. It's our mindset and our energy that needs to change and kind of circle back to what the ancients once knew that we have let go of along the way in the name of quote unquote innovation.
That is a beautiful perspective and a great way to end the podcast. So I really appreciate this, Dara. This has been a wonderfully enlightening conversation, and I hope that everybody at home finds some value in what we have been talking about for the last almost hour now. So for people, if somebody's out there and they're like, hey, I want to learn how to hold my breath underwater for 90 seconds, what's the best way to get a hold of you, as well as, shift their entire perspective, release limiting beliefs, all of that stuff as well?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of ways to connect with me and to work with me. I recommend following me on Instagram. I'm generally pretty active there. It's a good way to kind of stay up to date on my offerings and also just kind of to learn new things about yourself and myself and the planet. You can go to my website, onebreathdeep.com, which will have all of the information for my upcoming retreats and workshops and things like this. I have various retreats coming up through 2024 that'll be kind of announced over the next few months. It'll be in different parts of the world, and I'll also be hosting some workshops and things online. And I also work with Breathwork clients one-on-one, in person and online. So there's a whole bunch of ways to connect with me if you'd like. And I'm always happy to chat if people want to send me a message on Instagram or email. I most likely will get back to you as soon as I have some free time.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll make sure I link those in the show notes. So if you want to get up with Dara, it'll be super easy to do that. So thanks again for coming on the show. There was no there's no coincidences in the world. So me going to Potrero and, connecting with you and going to the same yoga studio, I mean, this has happened for a reason. So I'm excited to see where both of our journeys lead to. And it's been beautiful, seeing your journey unfold as it has.
Thank you so much. I love the synchronicities that we find in life every step of the way. Thank you so much for having me. This has been so much fun. I love doing podcasts, and it's great to connect with you again.
Yeah, you as well. Have a good one.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you again for listening to Changing the Channel with Joe Garner. If you enjoyed the show, please follow the podcast, hit the bell to know when a new show comes out, share with a friend, and rate us on whatever platform you're tuning in from. It helps get these messages out to more people to create the collective shift in reality we are here to experience. Make sure you interact with the Q&A and poll sections of the show so I can continue to provide content you enjoy. Finally, check out my website in the show notes to become a VIP of Changing the Channel and join the shift that is happening.